Good morning again. Thank you for staying with us. We were speaking earlier with the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, and we had a good conversation with him on matters now in the public domain. And we want to move on now to Commander Garvin Heerah to talk about some national security issues. Is he on the line?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm hearing you, Dr. Tiwari.
Right. Let's lift his voice so that he can be clearly heard by the population. How are you? Good morning. Good to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. It is indeed a pleasure to be here and to join the conversation this morning. Thank you.
All right. I asked the AG just now, and I asked the Minister of National Security before him, because I had him, I think, yesterday. And I asked him the question if we were in a constitutional crisis, and both members of the government, the AG and the Minister of National Security, said no. And I don't want to get you into constitutional matters, but I want to get your perspective before we get into national security issues. Do you think, or do you have a sense that we might be in the throes of a constitutional crisis in this country, given all the things that have happened with the Public Service Commission? The Office of the Prime Minister has been involved, the Office of the AG, the Office of the President. We've had the parliamentary intervention by the leader of the opposition. That has turned out to be a controversial issue as well. Do you have a sense that we are in a constitutional crisis?
Well, to be quite truthful, Dr. Tiwari, and a pleasant good morning to our viewing and streaming public who are part of this conversation this morning. We have continued to hear about issues with the Constitution, requests, prompts, more so directives to consider some sort of change and amendments and moving forward for the betterment of Trinidad and Tobago. We have to understand also that the term gatekeepers, now the gatekeepers of our Constitution, as far as I am concerned, based on my experience in the platforms, is not only the government or the administration that is in power. It is everybody, inclusive of the public, inclusive of the opposition, because the Constitution guides. That's the rudder that steadies the ship. And the AG and the Minister of National Security would have been very reserved, probably protective as gatekeepers, to indicate that we are not in a constitutional crisis. I am saying that we are in a state where we need to review the Constitution. Is it at a crisis stage? I'm not sure yet, but our role, our function must be predictive and proactive governance. And if we see something going in a certain direction, it is our responsibility to pull back, restore, restabilize so that it does not get, quote unquote, to crisis. We are not in a comfortable place, and it is a concern for the citizenry. So my statement is we are in a constitutional concern that can lead to a crisis, and as gatekeepers, we need to review what is taking place and restabilize the rudder so that we can stay afloat. That's my response.
So you think we need to take a serious look at reform of the Constitution, vision of the Constitution?
I want to go on record as saying I think we need to take a very stern, serious, firm stand on the reform of the Constitution for the sustainable development of Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, good. And I welcome the fact that you would state your position on this issue. Mr. Heerah, you are very familiar with this situation in Trinidad and Tobago as far as crime is concerned. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you some questions about what's happening on the crime front now. First of all, do you have a sense that crime is on the rise? Are criminals getting bolder? I mean, this morning in the newspapers, we don't have too much of that. But yesterday, I had been abroad and I came in the night before. And when I opened the papers in the morning, there were some in my view, shocking stories of criminal boldness. And the other issue is, do we have a problem that seems to be getting worse in Trinidad and Tobago on the criminal front? I mean, let's address that first.
Yeah. One has to understand, Dr. Tiwari, and to our team and to those who are listening, crime gives you a roller coaster effect sometimes. One time it's up, another time it's down. Sometimes it even appears to be seasonal, depending on what season we are going in. We'll find an upsurge in crime, or we'll find like a decline in crime. And therefore, what we are facing presently is that upsurge. But do we or are we in a situation where crime is out of control? I don't think so. But we are seeing some brazen homicides. We are seeing some boldness amongst the criminals. But we've always been seeing that, and that is what it worries me, because if we have received and under concern based on our analysis and based on what we were seeing, a certain type of criminal activity, the question begs me to ask, then what were some of the systems, what were some of the implementations and the rollouts that we were considering so that doesn't repeat itself? And when we have a repetition of a certain type of crime, it means that we are not addressing how these crimes are being committed or who are committing these crimes. And that is what causes the concern. Whether it's up or whether it's down, once you have that sort of repetition, once you have that sort of boldness, once you have that sort of brazen disregard for law enforcement, but we've been here before. I've seen this before. I've seen these drive-bys, these multiple shootings, 2 people dead, amputations, violence, house invasions. Why haven't we addressed this, be it from a community perspective or be it from a different strategy or tradecraft? And that is where I think I pivot my concern.
Do you think that not having a commissioner of police and the fact that the entire police service commission has collapsed and we are striving to reconstitute it, but that that has not yet been done, and we don't know how that is going to go. Do you think that these things have created a situation in which the gangs and the criminals are more emboldened now and basically testing the waters to see what will happen?
There is a percentage out there that the criminals are testing the waters. And that has a lot to do with us, the gatekeepers, the same term that I used a while ago. If we continue to feed and contribute towards the propaganda that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is headless, that there is no leadership, that there is no strategy, there is no ability to counter some of the issues with crime and criminality, then that propaganda feeds into the citizenry, feeds into that people system of criminals, and they would get an extra oomph of, let's say, confidence to commit crime, because they believe that, okay, we don't have a commissioner of police, and the police really don't know what they're doing. So we get an ease, the gates are open, we can do what we have to do. And therefore, at that point, I would strongly advocate that we need to have a stronger, firmer communication by the executive of the police service. At this time, okay, we don't have a title on a door, we don't have a flag flying in front of a car, but we do have leadership. And therefore, the leadership needs to re-strategize their communication with the public so that there is a sense of comfort and a sense of assurance and a strong, firm message is sent to that people system of criminals. And that goes as far as within the cells and the cell walls of the jails, because within there is a certain type of ideology and criminality and communication that is coming out and reaching onto the streets, and people are committing crime with the expectation that they're not going to be punished. They are committing crime with the expectation that there's not going to be a response. They're committing crime thinking that, you know what, the police really is on some sort of pullback because they don't know what tomorrow brings. And we have to combat that propaganda with positive, firm communication and positive, firm action that brings a certain amount of control to what we're seeing presently.
Well, I need you to explain this term propaganda, because I mean, the fact is that we do not have a commissioner of police, and it looks like a commissioner of police cannot be appointed soon, because a police service commission has to be appointed and be able to function, and they must now go through the process of making a recommendation, sending a list to Her Excellency the President, who will then deliberate and send to the Parliament. Now, in that kind of situation, we are not going to have a commissioner of police for some time. Now, there is a vacuum, all right, of leadership in the police service. And the person who is basically functioning as the head of the police service now is in fact the Deputy Commissioner of Police. Now, I agree with you that the status of the head of the police service is not the critical issue here, although I acknowledge that not having a commissioner, a stable commissioner of police, can be problematic, and that what is required is leadership from the Deputy Commissioner of Police, who is now in charge, and the accounting officer. And I do acknowledge that, yes, you need to have clear communication to make sure that this vacuum is filled and the public confidence can be restored. But what is the propaganda that you are talking about that is causing, you might say, the dissonance that allows the criminal to see an opportunity to strive?
Yeah, and we all know. I mean, you wrote the book on it. Propaganda is either positive or negative, and once you can orchestrate a following and a belief in something that is being said, a mindset, and you can sway the concerns and the thought process of a group of people, you have exercised and communicated propaganda. We, within our culture and the region, believe once you say propaganda, it's negative. Propaganda can also be positive once you are communicating a positivity towards a mindset and an action that brings a certain amount of what I call affirmations. But we are seeing on social media where there's a dominance of negativity towards the police service. There's a certain amount of dominance that there needs to be Gary Griffith, because if there's no Gary Griffith, this thing is going to fall apart. And that has taken up a certain wildfire approach, and it's burning a track and a pathway that is now communicating a certain message to the criminality, to that an environment of criminality. And the criminals are absorbing that, and you're seeing messages, you're hearing conversations, you're observing. So it brings me to a point then, does the police service at this point strap on their binocular, microscopically looking into what is taking place in social media, so that we have a sort of behavioral economics approach where you can design strategies based on the behavior of what you're picking up out there and the spectrum of social media, or in the communication realms, in the media, the print and the television media, of what is being said. People have to get more serious about country rather than communicating and inoculating negativity, because this is hitting hard against the police service. At this point, the dominance is we don't have a commissioner of police, so there's a destabilization. Only if we appoint a commissioner of police can the police service be stabilized, and that is not so. So therefore, it is necessary. Doors have to be open. The DCPs, not only the DCP, the DCPs need to stand up and to exhibit that leadership across the executive of the police service, take charge and have a business continuity of operations. We are expected that all leaders that go into office exercise and implement succession planning, so that one day someone can fit into the seat, someone can take up the mantle, someone could continue along the lines of what we're doing. And I am not seeing that business continuity of operations. Yes, we have to make changes on the fly. Yes, we have to adjust. Yes, we have to amend, but there's a significant delivery that is necessary that we are not seeing. And that is an aspect of strategy that needs to be communicated firmly to the executive of the police service so that they can begin that rollout and bring back, just as you said, bring back a response capability that assures and comforts the citizenry and the populace of Trinidad and Tobago.
Now, I mean, in the age of misinformation, you have all kinds of conspiracy theories floating around. So, for instance, with the vaccine and the COVID, there are a whole set of conspiracy theories that are very strong in their currency and their capacity for influence. On the issue of the Commissioner of Police, there is a conspiracy theory. And some people are suggesting that there has been a concerted effort or conspiracy to get rid of Gary Griffith, for instance. What is your view on this? But before I allow you to answer, I want to give you another view that was expressed to me yesterday. I had Ravi Balgovind Maharaj, who brought the suit against the Police Service Commission, in which Justice Kangaloo struck down the appointment in favor of the suit brought by Ravi Balgovind Maharaj, and basically declared the appointment null and void. And yesterday, when I put to him that, is there a conspiracy at work to keep Gary Griffith out of the commissionership of the police service, he retorted by saying that he thinks that from his perspective, there was in fact a conspiracy by either the chairman or the chairman and some members of the Police Service Commission to keep Gary Griffith as commissioner. So you have these contending views. One is that a conspiracy to get rid of the commissioner and a conspiracy to keep the commissioner. And as you yourself just mentioned, the social media is awash with all of these issues built around the personality of the former commissioner of police. Can you speak to this issue of conspiracy, whichever side or however you take these conspiracies into account?
Well, I will speak on it, but I will give a short preamble.
Yeah.
And you opened up by speaking about the prevalence and the prominence of conspiracy theory today in all spheres, in all sectors.
Yes.
And the reason why this beast has been allowed to blossom and to grow to its maximity that we're seeing today, really and truly, is because there has been a market. There's a market and there's a demand for that type of conspiracy theory, be it the vaccine, be it gender equality, national security, governance, opposition, you name it. Conspiracy theory has designed and developed a market with a demand, and it's being marketed. And people are making a lot of money on establishing themselves as conspiracy theorists. And there's a listening aspect to all of this. That is some of the new challenges that you face in corporate governance and of course, in the governance of countries today, to treat and to deal with conspiracy theory. I would strongly say, I'm not going to go on record as saying, I think there's a conspiracy, I don't think there's a conspiracy. I think when we have conversations like this, it is an opportunity to bring solutions forward.
Yeah.
I think when we have conversations and dialogues like this, Dr. Tiwari, is so that people can offer opinions that can be considered, listened to by decision makers and strategists, and utilize at least something that was said there and see if we could design a way to bring this thing to closure, to bring this thing to some meaningful decision at the end of the day. And therefore, if we are having this amplified volume of there is a conspiracy theory, there is no conspiracy theory, and people are saying things, the courts are making decisions, and we're seeing a lot of stuff taking place on the canvas, then let us set up some sort of neutral investigative body that can have the freedom of access to information, to statements, be it investigative or willingly, bring the facts forward and weigh, depending on law and opinion, whether or not there was or is a conspiracy, and let the decision unfold at the end of the day. The hard question is, who are we going to consider for such a neutral platform? And I think this has to be an agreement between maybe the House of Parliament, maybe who are people who have been appointed, maybe the president that as she does neutral appointments. I don't know. But I am just brainstorming and showing this out here. Let us submit what has taken place, each single element and dynamic, and allow it to be exposed and investigated and examined. And from there, come up with information that could dictate or determine a result, so as to prove whether there was a conspiracy or there wasn't a conspiracy. Are we as leaders today brave and courageous enough to expose ourselves to a 360-degree evaluation by our employers, those who has put us in power? And that would be my concern, that would be my solution contribution.
Okay, I take it that you are talking not about this particular issue, but you're talking about society in general and information and misinformation and conspiracy theories in general. And what you are talking about is an independent institution that have investigatory powers that can do this and bring the facts to the public in an independent and objective way. Is that what you're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about. And the COP fiasco is just one statistic on that, brother.
All right, okay. Now, given our current situation, we are where we are. What do we do in national security and with national security? I mean, we're talking about the police service, but there are other arms of national security. Do we need to re-strategize? Do we need to reconfigure? Do we need to redesign? How should we proceed, given where we are, until the matter of the constitutional issues, the legal issues, and the appointments issue are in a position to establish a commissioner of police? What could we do in the meantime? You talked about constitution reform. We can go for that, but that is a long process. We have a hiatus now with the Police Service Commission. What do we do in the meantime? Because we have an escalating problem and we need to manage it. And we have national security institutions and apparatus. How do we deal with this?
Okay, first I'll ask you another question. I will ask you a question before I answer Dr. Tiwari. What is the office that's in charge of national security?
Well, we have two offices really. One is the Minister of National Security, under whom the security apparatus falls, and the second one is the National Security Council, which is headed by the Prime Minister.
Right, and co-chaired by the Minister of National Security.
Yes.
Right, so anyhow you look at it, the arrows, the lights flick on in the room of the Minister of National Security. And I am saying, and I'm advocating firmly, we have gone past the operations, and mind you, I'm not saying strategy yet, the operations of a Ministry of National Security under the helm of one minister. We have to recognize that the geographic span of management, the roles and the responsibilities of national security has expanded and extended beyond the reach and the tentacles of a minister of national security and probably 2 or 3 PSs. Because it's the same Minister of National Security who co-chairs and chairs sometimes with the Prime Minister's consent, the National Security Council. So it rotates right back to his command and control. And it is an it is a very large expanse of control and administration and operations and dealing with the issues of across the spectrum of national security for one-manism. Whether we establish multiple parliament secretaries to support the minister, but we have to extend that first and foremost so that the various arms of national security can be led, the strategies can contribute towards the operability of the system, but more importantly, we have to revisit the national security strategy for Trinidad and Tobago, and we have to do that quickly, expeditiously, because we are at a place where the national security the national security strategy, dictates the unfolding and the implementation of what we intend to cover. And I would like to advise that we need to look and see how we do business. And I will strongly recommend that the minister or his team that is going to be implemented, I don't think it should be minister alone, establish an approach known as project governance approach for the Ministry of National Security. Run the ministry as a business and a corporate system. Not so much as for investment and transactions and money exchanges. People who are myopic might think that way. But apply it with a business mind approach. And project governance indicates an understanding, Dr. Tiwari. You set deliverables, you provide resources, you give a timeline, and most importantly, you hold people accountable to those deliverables, the spending power that you have given them, and to deliver in a time frame. Everyone needs to up their game and work towards completing these projects from a project governance approach with an oversight that is going to hold you accountable. And this involves crime suppression, strategy implementation, expansion and transformation of services, and big one, the HR aspect, the NSP, the national security personnel, who are called upon to deliver, who are called upon to produce, who are called upon to sustain the essential aspects of the frontline deliveries, especially in this pandemic and especially in this state of emergency. Change your strategy.
Yeah, all right. I get the big picture issue that you are raising, and I will come back to that. But you think, for instance, the hiring of civilian personnel in national security by the former chief of police and the subsequent firing now of all of these contract officers, do you think that these things have a destabilizing and disturbance generating effect on the police service? And do you think the police service now might be a more divided kind of institution? And do you think perhaps that some of the allegations that are made from time to time that there might be members of the police service connected to criminal elements or basically subversive of the intention to enforce the law, do you think that these things have any currency? Do you think that they might be factors that we need to take into account as we look at the whole picture and look at the issue of governance?
Those are multiple questions that are leading to...
Yeah, well, I mean, I know you have a good mind. I figure you could figure it out.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine. First and foremost, there will always be for and against. Is there a line of division? I don't think so. But there will be for and there will be against. And as you deal with matters at the strategic level and the executive level that rolls out into your operations and tactical levels, there is an elephant in the room that will always exist. And that is resistance. And resistance can either make or break the organizational efficiency of your outcome or your end game. So what would have taken place with, using your term, the firing of the civilian employees would have caused some concerns. Lights would have gone on, and people would now be very concerned maybe for the continuance of their job security if they came in under contract under the tenure of the former commissioner of police. That's normal. It's the concern. It's a psychosocial sort of concern that happens to everyone. You begin thinking self-preservation when you see certain things taking place. But one thing that needs to be communicated and probably brought out in the open is that before any appointment is made, there needs to be a meticulous due diligence process. And before any exit strategy or termination of contracts are exercised, there needs to be meticulous due diligence processes. So therefore, a good question to ask, or let's open the door a little bit on what was the due diligence process for the hiring of these civilians that were terminated, and what was the due diligence process for the termination of these civilians that were fired. And let us weigh on the ratio of due diligence and discoveries what sort of decision was made. I am not in favor of making rash decisions. I'm not in favor of pressing crisis buttons and making hurriedly decisions, because especially when it comes to termination of contract, especially when it comes to what has been contributed and what has been some of the deliverables that we would have seen, you must be able to design exit strategies for people who have served in sensitive positions. And that is not just the signing of an NDA. That is having recognized and be applauded your contribution, but we are now moving on to a next phase, new season, new leadership, and therefore the exit strategy has to be deeply considered and applied. So I am going to ask, can we get a breakdown of the due diligence on how and why these people were employed, and a breakdown of the due diligence on how and why these people were terminated? That there provides the spectrum for understanding and information, empirical evidence, information sharing for opinion creation.
Right. I get the feeling that that there is in your mind a sense of too much arbitrariness in all of this thing that is going on, especially something like national security, which requires stability and also the perception of stability and solidity. And I can't say that I disagree with you, really. I really think that there's a kind of arbitrariness that is taking place now that is very disconcerting and very concerning. And too many things are happening at the same time that are creating dissonance. And there has to be some kind of sense of order and process and due process in this system. But I'm going to give you the last word on this final question that I'm going to ask you, because we will have to close as we come up to 8 o'clock. You're talking about the need for expansion of the responsibility, but we have plenty problems with that. I want to say, first of all, that the National Security Council is not provided for in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. That the Commissioner of Police is a constitutionally recognized office in Trinidad and Tobago. Also, the head of the military service, the Army, if you want to call it that.
The Chief of Defense Staff.
The Chief of Defense Staff, they run their own show. The head of the Coast Guard runs his or her own show. And the Minister of National Security is responsible for national security policy, but he depends on these people to operate the system and to continue the system. That's why I asked you the question of the problem of possible corruption, collusion, etc. before. And this is so also for the prison service and all of those things. So the question of governance of the security system, we have a real problem, which is that you do not want to politicize that system. You want it to be a professional system. But yet you have politically accountable people for the security of the state. How do we resolve this issue? We've got to close. So I asked you for a quick question. We can have another discussion on another occasion. You can open up, just close up on this.
Yeah. The point that you brought forward is real, especially in the realism of what is in the tapestry of our constitution and what isn't. But we have to understand also the security of the state. And the security of the state falls under the remit of each one of those platforms that you just mentioned. And that security feeds upwards towards the Ministry of National Security that has the oversight to ensure that the state is secured. And what we are seeing is fragmentation. You're quite correct, be it from the arbitrations or be it from that whole issue of out of order. And I think there needs to be the right specialism applied to how do we take fragmentation, build it back into a strong block, a platform, a sort of table that can bring stability. So that, yes, there is some independence with the Chief of Defense Staff. Yes, there is some independence with the Commissioner of Police. But that independence is not a free rein to do as you wish. That independence is to ensure that command and control of your area or your zone of responsibility is in tandem or aligned to your national security strategy, of which you were a contributor, of which you deposited. So therefore, we have to look at that linkage between our national security strategy and policy and to the roles and responsibilities of each arm of national security. Are we contributing towards the rollout, the deliverables, and the outcome of our strategy? This is a conversation I think that warrants another interview, of which I would like to make myself.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We've got to close up now. I want to thank you, Mr. Heerah, for your contribution. This is Brighter Morning with Bo. We spoke this morning to the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Faris Al-Rawi, and we spoke to the former head of the NOC, Mr. Garvin Heerah, on constitutional matters, legal matters, and national security matters. Thank you for being with me. See you tomorrow. This is Brighter Morning with Bo. I am Bo Tiwari. We break now for the 8 o'clock.